So tell me if this sounds familiar. You start getting super excited to work on a new art project. You even do your planning, you set up your supplies, and then when it finally comes time to sit down and get to work and start that drawing or that painting, you get hit with all of this self-doubt. You start second guessing your concept. You start getting nervous because you don't know how to correctly move through the drawing or painting process, or you fear wasting or ruining your precious, pristine art supplies. And then when you finally build up that courage to get started with your drawing or painting, you advance a small amount, but things are just not looking right to you. So you give up way too soon. Or you take forever to finish any single piece because you redo the same little thing over and over and over again, to the point that when you finally finished, you're left drained and completely exhausted, with no desire to go through that process again. Or you manage to stay consistent with your art practice for 2 or 3 months, but you have pressured yourself so much along the way to create these masterpieces or to do more work than you can actually handle, to the point that you burn yourself out completely and you stop creating art altogether, maybe even for years, and then you have to restart your art practice all the way back up from zero. I struggled with this myself for years, and it wasn't until I started learning about how our brain works and until I started doing the deeper introspection work, the reflection, to start understanding where my perfectionism was coming from. And it wasn't until I started prioritizing my enjoyment that I finally saw that growth and that development that I was looking for. And honestly, if I hadn't started doing that work, I wouldn't be here today making a living doing what I love. And if I hadn't let go of that need to be perfect or be good in the eyes of those around me. But I'm not going to lie, this is something that I need to continue working on every single day, because being an artist and putting your work out there, it requires a lot of courage, and every single day you need to remind yourself of the progress that you've made and that you are worthy of pursuing this path, and that your art matters. Someone who I greatly admire is Seth Godin. If you don't know who he is, I would highly recommend checking his stuff out, but he talks about shipping your work. And this is something that I think as artists, if you're looking to even just develop your skills to a higher level, but especially if you're looking to do this professionally, you have to be comfortable doing. And in order to ship your work consistently, you need to be okay with putting it out there, even though it is not up to your highest standards that you set for yourself. And I wanted to share this message with you today because doing what I do, I speak with so many different artists of all kinds of levels, and so many of us struggle with this for reasons that I'm going to be talking about later in this video. But I think that it is so incredibly unfortunate that so many artists give up way too soon and honestly don't enjoy their journeys because of perfectionism. In this video, I'm going to talk about what perfectionism is, where it usually stems from, mental health things that have to do with perfectionism, and something that I learned about how perfectionism is connected with ADHD, how perfectionism affects us specifically as artists, and how it can show up for us in our artistic journey. And finally, I'm going to be providing some practical tips that really helped me break away from my perfectionism so that I could finally see the success that I was looking for. So let's get started with the first part of this video, where I'm going to be explaining what perfectionism is. Perfectionism goes beyond just trying to do a good job at something. This is the definition that Astute Psychology provides. They say it's the relentless drive to meet impossibly high standards, often accompanied by fear of failure or judgment. Listen to this. Perfectionists tend to tie their self-worth to their achievements, believing that any mistake, no matter how small, reflects negatively on their value as a person. I'll be linking to the articles where I took the quotes that I'm going to be sharing with you down below in the text section of this post, in case you'd like to read further into them. The American Psychiatric Association, defines perfectionism as the tendency to demand of others or of oneself an extremely high or even flawless level of performance in excess of what is required by the situation. It is associated with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and other mental health problems. And as I said, I do have a section in this video where I'm going to be getting more into mental health, so do stay tuned for that. So perfectionism is not the same as striving to be better or striving to improve at something. It is a deep-rooted anxiety that you're not enough, and you have to prove that you're enough to others through creating something that is perfect, seeking acceptance. And I think that it is important to also realize that we're all human beings. Sometimes we have better days than others. Sometimes you are a little bit more confident than other days. You know, we go through experiences that are hard, that sometimes make us feel sad or that lower our confidence, you know? So it's fine and it's normal to have good days, to have bad days. But having bad days and having this low self-worth and this desire to constantly prove yourself to others is a prevalent thing with people who struggle with perfectionism deeply. And it's also important to realize that if this is something that you're really struggling with, it's not just going to show up in your art practice, it's going to show up in all areas or most areas of your life. If in different areas of your life you're constantly seeking outside validation, you struggle with this harsh inner critic, this little troll that is always telling you that you're stupid, that you're not good enough, that you don't deserve making time for whatever it is that you're doing, or you don't deserve success, intense defensiveness, or you struggle to accept compliments. For people who really struggle with this, their self-worth as human beings is directly tied to their ability to create these flawless results in these different areas of their lives. And if they don't achieve those most amazing, most excellent results, then their self-worth goes down. If they receive any sort of critique on their efforts, that is not only met with a very defensive attitude or a need to want to explain yourself, but also their self-worth or their self-confidence goes down. And this is one of the key things that I learned that allowed me to finally move away from that perfectionism that I was experiencing, is that I am worthy, you know, accepting that you are worthy of what you want and of other people's love and other people's acceptance. You are worthy because you're here. You should be proud of what you created because you tried, and you are worthy, flaws and all. And even though you made mistakes, that doesn't take away from your value and your worthiness as a human being. Trying is enough. Perfectionism usually stems from childhood experiences where we were constantly praised or rewarded for our high accomplishments in any area, whether it's academic, sports, any type of extracurricular. So if your parents or society or whoever it is made you feel really good only if you achieved the highest level of excellence, then it is very likely that you're going to seek that even as an adult. Of course, different negative experiences that we might have gone through in our childhood, such as experiencing bullying or being scolded by a teacher when you made a mistake. Things like that are also traumatic experiences up to a certain extent that can really affect us all throughout our lives, especially if we don't work on them. All of this can lead to a very intense desire to be the best and having this fear and anxiety because you don't want to make mistakes. You don't want to get rejected. And also, of course, the fact that we have social media nowadays also has a great impact on our mental health and what we expect of ourselves, because we're constantly seeing other people's most amazing moments, greatest works of art, and all of these things. But again, these are snapshots, and they are the best snapshots of other people's lives or other people's accomplishments. Usually, they are not going to be sharing those bad moments, those moments when they were feeling down, when they were crying on the floor, when they made those mistakes. You're not seeing all of that. And so when you're just seeing these incredible snapshots, you can't help but compare yourself to that and think that you are behind and think that you're not doing enough, or that you don't have what it takes to be whatever it is that you're observing. But you have to see it as what it is, just bits and pieces of other people's lives. And one of the reasons why perfectionism can be a very big hindrance for artists and creatives is because not only is drawing, painting, sculpting, whatever it is that you like to do, it's a skill that you need to learn and you need to develop. And you need to be okay with going through that sucky phase where we're not good, right? We're not good at it. And we have to be okay with sucking and making mistakes and creating bad art. And art in and of itself, even when you're highly skilled, it's messy sometimes. Things look bad before they look good. Not to mention, experimentation is an incredibly important part of finding and developing your art style. So accidents, duds, all of these things are just part of our journey. If we don't accept that they are part of the process, we're going to give up way too soon. We're going to be very quick to come to a conclusion that we're not meant to be an artist, that we don't have what it takes, when this is not the case at all. Perfectionism is going to keep you from producing the amount of work that you need to produce, not only to develop your skills, but also to develop your voice, to develop your style. So it's not hard to understand why perfectionism can really prevent you from reaching that level that you have it in you to reach. In past videos, I've talked about the resistance that artists and creatives of all different fields, writers, actors, musicians, face so often in our journey. It's like a prevalent thing, this resistance. And I've talked about Steven Pressfield's book, The War of Art, in which he explains about this resistance, which I would highly recommend reading if you haven't already. It's very, very helpful. And I want to explain the difference between this resistance that Steven Pressfield talks about and perfectionism, because there is a difference. Both resistance and perfectionism can be obstacles for artists that keep us from creating the amount of art that we should be creating, and are also related to fear and self-doubt, but there is a difference. In his book, The War of Art, Steven Pressfield explains that when we are faced with the challenge of doing something that is important to us, we are going to face that resistance. The more important something is to us, the more resistance we're going to feel. We are going to be feeling a little bit stressed in the beginning before jumping into the process, a little bit nervous, but a little bit excited at the same time. This is normal for everyone. There is a healthy degree of nerves, of excitement before jumping into anything new. The difference between someone who isn't really a perfectionist and someone who is that the non-perfectionist is usually going to let go a little bit more once they have started on the task. So it's a little bit hard to get started, but once you begin, you let go a little bit more, you enjoy the process to the point that you're able to experience creative flow. Whereas when someone is a perfectionist, they are going to be struggling the whole way through. So not only in the beginning before jumping in, but throughout the entire process, they're going to be constantly critiquing their actions, second guessing themselves, turning on too much that part of their brain where they are constantly analyzing what they're doing and seeing every possible flaw that they have to go back and fix. And you can see how this constant inner critiquing voice that they're experiencing all the way through is not going to allow them to get into that beautiful state of flow. And not only this, but the process is going to be very frustrating, very overwhelming, very draining. Both resistance and perfectionism can lead to us procrastinating and not starting anything at all. But when someone is a non-perfectionist, they're usually going to make themselves do the thing anyway, especially if it means a lot to them or it will help them progress in an area that is important to them, and they're not going to have any major issues getting the thing done. Many perfectionists either don't begin or never finish things. And I've talked about self-evaluation before and why it's so important to practice self-evaluation as artists. You know, coming back to your pieces 2-3 weeks a month after you have finished it, when you have distanced yourself from the piece enough in order to acknowledge both your strengths and your weaknesses so that you can move forward with a greater focus and then progress faster. Whereas with perfectionists, when they practice self-evaluation, they are going to find it very difficult to see any of those things that they did right. Which I assure you, if you saw an entire piece through, whether it's a drawing, a painting, or whatever it is, there are many things that you did right along with those little weaknesses that you want to continue working on. We have to get great at acknowledging both our strengths and our weaknesses, the things that we did right and the things that we want to continue improving on. Perfectionists are going to have lots of trouble acknowledging their wins, especially when it comes to something like art, which is subjective, which you create entirely on your own most of the time. And as artists, it's so important to acknowledge and celebrate those milestones and to see how far you've come. So now that I have explained what perfectionism is and where it stems from, let's talk about how perfectionism presents itself specifically for artists. To begin, art is subjective. There is no one tool or resource or person that can tell you objectively whether a piece is good or bad. While absolutely yes, you can get feedback, and I think that feedback and critique from others, especially people who are farther ahead in their journeys, can be incredibly valuable for you. It is you who is ultimately going to come to a decision whether the piece is good or bad. Another reason why perfectionism is something that so many artists struggle with is because it's us and us alone creating our pieces. It is our concept, it is our process. It's like this product that we're creating is a piece of us. It's coming from us. It is very hard to not internalize the critique that we receive, right? We take it as a critique on us as a person, on us as an artist. It is very important that if you are going to be doing this professionally, that you learn to separate yourself from the products that you are creating. And while yes, art is very personal, it is not you. And hopefully you're going to be creating so many pieces throughout your journey that is just one teeny tiny thing in this vast array of artwork that you're going to be creating. So you can't be connected to every single thing. You're going to be growing in your journey so much that even 5 years down the line, you're likely not even going to like that piece anymore or see it as a reflection of your current self. The way that I see it, my paintings, my drawings are a small snapshot of my current point in time in my journey, but there has to be this healthy separation between my work and myself. Another thing that I think affects a lot of women especially is that we have trouble setting aside time for activities that bring us joy, for activities that we've always wanted to grow in. We kind of set our wants and needs aside, or we diminish them. We give them less importance than other people's wants and needs. I have spoken with so many female students especially who explain, and I felt this myself in the beginning of my journey, when they finally sit down to start a drawing or painting, they feel guilty because they're not cleaning the house, they're not washing the dishes, they're not making lunch or whatever. They feel guilty for making time for themselves. And this is so incredibly unfortunate. I can only begin to imagine how many more female artists we would have if more of us made time for our art. And the reason why I'm saying this is because for a lot of people, when they finally make time for themselves, especially if you're feeling guilty about making time for yourself and your art practice, you may pressure yourself to create something amazing so that you can show that off to people or have it as proof that the time that you spent into that practice was worthy or was worthwhile, because look at what you created, right? During that time, versus if you don't have something perfect or good enough to share with people, then you feel that time was wasted. So that perfectionism can also reflect itself in that way. Here are 6 specific ways that I've seen perfectionism present itself either in my life or in lives of my students that I've chatted with. Number 1, you avoid starting a piece because you're afraid it won't turn out well. Number 2, you overwork your piece so much that it ends up looking flat and lifeless. Number 3, you constantly compare yourself with other artists and fear never measuring up. Number 4, you're unable to accept compliments on your work or make your accomplishments small. Number 5, you always experience anxiety or dread to different degrees when you're creating art, which make it very difficult for you to experience creative flow. And number 6, you never share your art because it's not ready or it's not perfect. If any of these sound familiar, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you, and this way we can all help each other out. So make no mistake, perfectionism will keep artists stuck because it will keep you from experimenting, from taking risks, from making mistakes, which are all part of the creative process and are all part of our journeys as artists. In past videos, I've talked about how your mental and physical health are incredibly important, and you should be constantly working on them because they are the foundation for everything else in your life. You cannot expect yourself to do very well at anything or to even focus enough to get anything done if you're struggling mentally and physically. I've also talked about in past videos how many times artists think that they are experiencing creative burnout or block, but the overwhelm, the exhaustion that they're feeling, it actually has to do more with the fact that they are not taking care of themselves mentally and physically. If you're struggling with perfectionism, I want to encourage you to do some journaling, talk with friends, talk with family members, seek therapy if you need to. That can be incredibly helpful as well. And don't think that it's going to go away just because you talked with a therapist once. If this is very deep rooted for you, you're going to have to continue working on it long term. But it is incredibly worth it, because if you work on this, it will positively impact all areas of your life, not only your art journey. As I mentioned before, pressuring yourself to do the absolute best at everything and constantly striving to do the best you possibly can in the eyes of those around you, it creates a cycle of stress and disappointment. It leads to anxiety, it leads to depression, it leads to you not enjoying this beautiful life that you are given. And I have many students who, like me, are on the spectrum. And I do want to mention that I read this article, which I'll make sure to link to down below, which explains this connection between ADHD and perfectionism. The article explains how, as someone with ADHD, throughout your life, you've probably experienced people's maybe even disappointment when you fail to see something through, or when you jump from task to task, people just show their disappointment because you're not able to stick to one thing enough to get it done. Many people who struggle with ADHD as children or teenagers or even beyond that, they are criticized by teachers, parents, etc., for being inconsistent, for being disorganized, for never finishing anything. And this can lead to a sense of deep guilt in people, where as adults, you are berating yourself because you can never stick to one thing. Many adults with ADHD who struggle with the sense of guilt start pressuring themselves to finally see something through, even though maybe their heart is not in it, just so that they can prove to themselves and to others that they actually have it in them to complete something. But by pressuring yourself so much and trying to overcompensate, you're actually making it hard for yourself to finish anything, because this pressure doesn't allow you to enjoy yourself. I really wanted to include this note on ADHD because I know that a lot of you struggle with this. I am on the spectrum myself, but for something different. And I'll make sure to link to that article down below in case you'd like to continue reading more. Okay, so I am now moving on to sharing the 5 main things that I have done myself, which have helped me overcome my perfectionism and have helped me do the thing anyway and finish the work anyway and get it out there anyway, even though they are not 100% up to my standards, because I know that this is so important. Tip number 1 is going to be to focus on the process and not the outcome. See, most perfectionists are giving too much importance, or all of the importance, to the final product that they create, when in fact, in my opinion at least, what matters most is the process that you put yourself through to create the piece, because it is through the process that you actually grow, that you actually get to know yourself. And it is through honing your process that the quality of the final piece is going to improve. In my opinion, it is the process, the creation of the piece that you should be attaching yourself to and not the final product. And if you value your unique voice and your own unique way of seeing the world, and you prioritize your enjoyment in that process, you will end up with better results. Tip number 2 is set realistic goals. You have to meet yourself where you're currently at. You have to acknowledge your current skill level when you are setting your goals, or even when you're planning for pieces that you're going to be working on. Before jumping into any new piece, ask yourself, is this something that is not completely new to me? Have I done something similar, right, before? Do I have a skill level currently and an understanding of art fundamentals that is going to allow me to tackle this piece? And I'm not saying that everything should be super easy. With every piece, there will be some challenges, but if everything in the piece is completely new to you, or it includes subject matter that you've never drawn or painted before, it's very much worth breaking things down, doing studies in isolation. Just as an example, if you've never painted a seascape before, it is very much worth practicing skies, practicing painting rocks or painting water in isolation. And then when you finally tackle that complete piece, at least you've practiced 80% of the techniques that you're going to be working with to create that final piece. If everything is super new to you, it's likely going to be very frustrating, and you're not going to be able to get into that state of flow because your brain is turned on too much trying to understand how to do everything. And I talk about this more in my Goldilocks zone video, which I will link to down below. I would highly recommend checking it out, because I explain exactly how to make sure that you are choosing a project that is appropriate for your current point in time in your journey. If you start a piece with this very general goal of just creating a beautiful masterpiece, that is way too general. What does that even mean? Break things down, make things practical, and then build up your skills gradually, incrementally. It will help you enjoy your journey so much more. Tip number 3 is work on your time management, or even time yourself as you're working. So many perfectionists struggle with never being able to finish anything, or never being able to call something done. And in these cases, it can be very helpful to give yourself a specific number of days or even a specific number of hours that you're going to be working on any given piece. Otherwise, you could be working on the same piece forever and ever. And I want to remind you that it is through going through the entire process of creation over and over again that you're going to be able to reach the skill level that you're after, and you're going to be able to find your style and hone your process, right? A person who goes through the process over and over again and is able to create, say, 10-15 pieces is going to learn a lot more and is going to have their process honed so much more than someone who only went through that process once in that entire time because they were never able to call something done. You can establish specific days or time blocks for yourself in which you're going to be working on the piece, or maybe even practice limiting yourself to only a couple of hours and see what you can do in that amount of time, and challenge yourself to call things done when the time is up. Tip number 4 is to embrace the idea that 80% is good enough. Again, with perfectionists, they want to always overachieve, always achieve 100% or even beyond that, right? That perfection, that 110% that you have in your brain, that beautiful, perfect vision, it doesn't actually exist. We are imperfect beings. Everything around us is imperfect. You are not God. You cannot create perfection, and imperfections can actually make your art more interesting, more unique. It can provide your art personality. Try to lower your expectations and learn to call things done when they are 80% good enough to you. And finally, tip number 5 is adopt a growth mindset, or a learner's mindset. I've talked about this before. I will link to Carol Dweck's TED Talk on the growth mindset down below in the text section of this post. People with a growth mindset believe that there is no cap or limit to what they can do. They believe that as long as they keep trying, they will continue growing and growing. And they see mistakes and failures as a normal part of the growing process, as proof that they are stepping out of their comfort zone and they are growing. And people with a fixed mindset believe that we are born with a certain limit to what we can do, to what we can create. And we're never going to be able to go past that limit. These are the people who usually believe that artists are born talented, that you won't be able to develop the skill to, for example, draw because you've only been able to draw stick figures for your entire life. And these are usually the people who have all of these limiting beliefs in terms of what art is, what an artist is, and maybe even what it means to have success as an artist. Growing as an artist, it takes time. This is a long-term thing that you need to devote yourself to. And during that time, you're going to be experiencing rejection, failure, critiques. People with a growth mindset see all of these things as stepping stones, as signs of growth. And people with a fixed mindset can see these things as reasons that they are not meant to be an artist or they don't have what it takes. And so you can see how it's easy for them to give up. If your art is important to you and you want to make this a long-term thing, it is incredibly important that you prioritize your mental health and also your enjoyment. It is through taking imperfect but consistent action that you're going to be able to reach the success that you're looking for. So be brave, take action in those areas that are important to you, that you know will change your life for the better. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, of getting messy, because this is how we all learn. You were given these curiosities, these interests for a reason, and you are meant to develop those gifts that you were given. It is through continuing to produce, even when you're afraid, by continuing to ship your work as well over time, that you are able to prove to yourself that you can do the things. You are capable of doing challenging things, and your confidence grows, the momentum keeps going, and you're able to do bigger, bolder things. Thanks so much for checking out this video. I hope that it was helpful. I'll leave you with a couple of videos right here that you can check out next, and see you very, very soon.